LGB. 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 LGB.
They say LGB everywhere I go. LGB. What it means, I don't know. LGB. Whatever it is. LGB. Kamala, help me, please. Please.
Alrighty then.
Thank you. LGB.
That's let's go, Brandon, right?
LGB.
This means let's go, Brandon.
No. LGB.
Sounds like let's go, Brandon, I guess.
LGB. All right. Let's go, Brandon.
I am Cornholio.
Chant LGB. Right wing and left wing. LGB. Go, you know the thing. LGB. If you don't sing, got back. LGB. And you ain't black. LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
LGB. Let's go, Brandon.
FJB. Let's go, Brandon.
I'm Joe Biden, and I
Forgot
this message.
Pause recording. Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this February 7th, 2024 at 7:54 a.m. Central Standard Time, and reminding you that Angel Paste Rose Infused Miracle Cream is available exclusively at epicthreads.tv, the best lotion the world has ever known, made only of food-grade plant oils, manufactured right here in Texas by my sister, invented by her. The results are amazing. We're seeing age spots fading. We're seeing dead skin tumbling off without a trace of abrasion, eczema, psoriasis being improved, sunburns prevented. It's an amazing product. Go to www.epicthreads.tv and click on Angel Paste. You can get the unscented or the rose infused. And a new scent, new infusion of essential oil is coming up for March. So keep your eyes open for that as well. In addition to other products just about to be added to the epicthreads.tv family of amazing Patriot-owned and poison-free products. Your skin will drink it up. All right. We're going to start with Martin Geddes. And I'm using Zoom instead of StreamYard because Ash is doing it at the same time as I am. And so I don't know if doing it both at the same time in StreamYard, Ash is doing the brief even as we speak. Well, she's about to in about 5 minutes. So I don't really want to interfere with that. I don't know if we can do it simultaneously. We probably can, but I don't want to mess with it. So here we are. I'm in Zoom. From newsletter.martingeddes.com, sword, shield, or serenade. There is a time and place to woo the individuals in authority, but don't waste songs. By Martin Geddes. Over the past year or two, I have shared many letters I have sent to people in authority. For a change, I'm going to share two that I wrote, but have decided not to send. I am experiencing violations of my civil rights and crimes against me, including fraud and treason. The most productive approach is to use the shield and sword and not to serenade those who impose upon me. That said, if I can turn them from adversaries into allies against the powers who divide us, that is a morally upstanding thing to do, just not at the cost of being weak or pissing in the wind. The first one is the draft I would have sent to the chief adjudicator of the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. It is to help surface that conscience and principles of natural justice have been abandoned. On reflection, I do need to put them on legal notice that they are accessories to fraud being committed by the DVLA and that they have exceeded their lawful authority, and as a result, the tribunal adjudication is unenforceable. So this conciliatory message will have to wait for another occasion. The loving thing to do is to protect myself from state predation first. The letter. Dear first name, I hope you will excuse me in addressing you through your first name, as this letter is being sent to you more in your personal capacity as a woman with a conscience than to your role as chief adjudicator and a practicing barrister. It is also to bring to life that I am Martin, a man with a conscience, and not just a legal name attached to an adjudication case. My purpose in writing is to surface an issue with the ultimate authority that you and your organization are serving. I happen to have experienced my first traffic penalty tribunal TPT hearing via video last week, but I am not reaching out in connection with the specifics of my case. There is a process for that, which I will follow. Before I get to the structural, moral, and constitutional issues I encountered with the TPT itself, I would like to say a few words of praise. While some of my misgivings about this legal procedure were confirmed, I also changed my mind in a positive direction about the value of what you and your colleagues do. I can now see how the format of the hearing brings high levels of professional expertise to administrative tussles at an extraordinarily low cost with the minimum of delay. You are revolutionizing everyday commercial and public law for travel-related disputes, smallest claims rather than small claims. This is in a manner akin to how low-cost airlines may have transformed travel to the benefit of all. Of this, you can be rightly proud. The quality of public administration is being enhanced. I have no complaint whatsoever about the diligence or professional presentation of the adjudicator, apart from she has been set up to break the law. She has followed your remit and process to the letter, which unfortunately may be unlawful, more below. Likewise, so did the public authority who were making the claim. They went by the book, which also stretches limits of the law. The catch is that this process has elevated a part of government, the DVLA, as it happens, above objective truth and natural justice in the real world. Sometimes the book itself is wrong, in fact, and/or superior law and fundamental civil rights are in play as a result. In this situation, following orders at a lower level of authority, e.g., secondary statute, goes against conscience, as a forfeit of liberty is occurring, the cost of which is far in excess of the monetary sum being adjudicated. In this context, the administrative tribunal outcome is nakedly perverse when compared to a hypothetical jury of one's peers in a court of conscience. This disconnect between asserted authority and the reasonable person tells us that we have abandoned our most cherished principles of justice. I raised matters of equitable treatment, case law, constitutional limits, tort, international treaty obligations, and legislative defects with the PCN. The merits of my arguments aren't the point. They were not vexatious, and the adjudicator described them as interesting, yet they cannot be adjudicated in the offered format or statutory remit. As the person suffering iniquity and forfeit of both civil and property rights, I can tell you that separation of powers, Bill of Rights 1689, equality under the law, Magna Carta 1215, due process, the European Commission on Human Rights, Article 6, freedom to travel, UNDHR, ECHR, ICCPR, etc., and equitable treatment on an equal footing to Senior Courts Act 1981 S49 and Magistrates Court Act 1980 S148 are not merely interesting. I am suffering loss of access to health care, right to protest, and ability to earn a living, all due to overreach of Parliament and public authorities. These tribunals operate in a contested area of the Constitution, and judicial reference tomes like Halsbury's laws of England say they are unconstitutional as they lack separation of powers. From a legal and moral perspective, one could argue that members of the public have agreed to private adjudication within the limited jurisdiction offered, which is merciless adherence to secondary legislation. That ignores the violation of free will that is happening, which has personal karmic consequences. I asked the TPT in advance of the hearing some simple questions like which jurisdiction the hearing is in and whether there is a duty to uphold the law in all its forms. I did not get an answer and was told that I had to ask the adjudicator. Yet the very short time slot presented me with the impossible choice of making basic inquiries about the legal framework we were operating in versus actually laying out my case. I spent most of the last month preparing, as the priceless principles involved vastly outweigh the $12.50 fee in dispute. My concern is not merely for myself or the public interest in accessing justice. My sense is that you are exposing yourself and your colleagues to moral, legal, and spiritual danger by operating in a capacity that risks being ruled as ultra vires by the Supreme Court or a higher international body down the road. This is not necessarily in blanket terms, but by failing to screen out cases that are more than administrative in nature. In particular, S16 of the regulations appears to be an alarming mismatch of jurisdictions and authority. A private tribunal whose adjudicator has no oath of office, no power of remedy, and where no counterclaim can be filed, is having their finding treated as equal to that of a court of equity, where there is full personal accountability for upholding the full law. Lord Chief Justice Widgery once condemned the extraction of money using administrative tribunals in this way as extortion, and I have some sympathy with that view. Yet, absolute condemnation neglects the value you bring by democratizing access to dispute resolution, so is unhelpful to the masses. By entering the arena of the tribunal, it is possible I surrendered many rights, but I was not given a real choice, both in clarity of the options as well as duress from putative debt enforcement. This is why a spiritual aspect is in play. Merely being legal is insufficient, as there is a residual matter of conscience and fairness under natural law. My purpose was to raise a wrong against me, and in doing so, I was turning the other cheek, as it happened. Both the council and the adjudicator decided that Parliament had told them I needed another slap. Yet, in their deepest personal convictions, I sensed their unease at what they were doing. The man and woman, as sovereign beings, were doing something to me that they would have objected to if the roles had been reversed. They wanted to find a way to provide an exception, as they knew it was wrong. Following orders worships state authority over the divine and has a poor pedigree. What Parliament is telling you to do, what the Constitution is telling you to do, and what our Creator is telling you to do, these are not in alignment. Ultimately, the real harm is to you. As practitioners of jurisprudence, no amount of legislative decoration can turn a lie or dishonorable act into truth and integrity. I could be going into an adversarial and legalistic mindset and writing notices, deploying estoppel, and seeking judicial review. From the basic need to protect myself from predation by the state, I may be forced to go down this route, but ultimately it is fruitless. And only a raising of consciousness of what we worship by implication can help us find peace. I have enclosed the case I made to the adjudicator because the issue is really nothing to do with vans, clear air zones, and PCNs. It is a systemic matter and constitutional in nature, and relates to power struggles at a level we have no individual access to, yet carry the personal consequences. I restate that I seek no intervention in my own case, and I have removed the case number on this basis. This is purely informational to make it real and aid you in seeing the deep disconnect between principles of justice and the practice in this instance. The matter for you to privately reflect on is the authority under which you act. If, for instance, DVLA classification conflicts with case law which takes precedence, with what is equitable in substance rather than form, with international treaty obligations, is the state legitimately empowered to do anything it wishes without constraint? If not, is DVLA or the council? If no, is the TPT as an organization? If not, the individual adjudicator? Ultimately, we cannot get away from conscience and the imperative to do unto others as we would have done unto ourselves. My concrete suggestion is that you think about whether S16 invites an overreach of lawful authority given the wider constitutional constraints under which we operate. Would it serve you to seek clarification of your remit from Parliament or others, in particular, should cases that touch on higher law be diverted to more traditional courts with administrative tribunals, ruthlessly limiting themselves in scope to purely administrative matters? How can you protect your own interests and conscience, as the knowing destruction of fundamental constitutional rights is technically treason? Is there any way in which I can assist you in thinking over these problems and aiding in putting your work onto a sounder constitutional conscience and conscience footing? Then I would be delighted to help. Angrily and adversarially holding public tribunals to account is fashionable, but lovingly and gracefully pointing out a spiritual lapse is rarely done. You are keeping the commercial peace. Just this cannot be done at the cost of aiding loss of cherished liberties. As someone with plenty of my own need for mercy and forgiveness, I hope this message lands in a way it can be heard. In a similar fashion, here is the note I am not sending to the council's representative. Dear first name, I am addressing you in both your capacity as a man of integrity as well as in your role at Newcastle City Council. My sense of our encounter on the recent traffic penalty tribunal is that you are feeling equally trapped as I am by an illogical system not of your making. I note the offer to settle the matter, yet there are priceless principles in play that render the monetary cost moot. I face a choice over whether to pay these PCNs under duress and have a quieter life and pursue justice in other ways, to challenge them in the county courts via the debt enforcement process on the basis of equity and due process, or seek a judicial review leapfrog application to the Supreme Court to judge the lawfulness of the tribunal itself. While clean air zones are contentious, the real issue is the rule of law and how cases are adjudicated. As such, I do not seek an adversarial relationship with Newcastle City Council over this matter, as the problem lies with Parliament and its overreach of power, especially S16 of the regulations and how that relates to forfeit of civil rights, both travel and property. My personal preference is to work with both the tribunal and yourself to aid you to cover off your own legal, moral, and spiritual risks. To achieve this requires empathy and communication. Walking away from this PCN matter may resolve it at the personal level, but it doesn't solve the deeper societal issues we collectively face. An aggressive and unscrupulous litigant could turn up after me in pursuit of similar matters, but with a less kind attitude. Would you be interested in having a without prejudice and off-the-record conversation so I can better understand your needs? What does Newcastle City Council need in order to flag up the issue via the correct authority? As you are doubtless aware, I am an activist and writer with a public platform. At the same time, I am just an ordinary man who wants to get on with life and seeks peace with my fellow man. There is clearly an issue of conscience that deserves attention. My belief is that it serves us all better to handle this in a sensitive and private way than to engage in messy public battles. We have enough of those going on already. If this offer is of interest to you, then feel free to reach out. My number is redacted. Who knows? If they are reading this, the message may still land. If nothing else, these ideas may be useful to others who are engaging with members of authority who are showing signs of a functioning conscience and appear uneasy at simply following orders. This is not a war against our fellow man, but against a process by which we need to elevate our collective consciousness to become self-governing, rising above the need to fight. The ultimate success of any warrior is removing the need to unsheath a sword or yield a shield. Nonetheless, a diplomatic serenade can be worse than useless if substituted for ruthless policing of one's boundaries. Bam. And that is the brilliant, wonderful, and conscience-driven Martin Geddes. Go to martingeddes.com/support. This is what Martin does for a living. He was drummed out of a very lucrative career in telecommunications. He was on the intellectual side of telecommunications. I want to say network topology, but I could be wrong about that. In any event, definitely support what he does if you have the means by which to do so. Now I'm going to get to what is probably a very short article by Vox Day at sigmagame.substack.com, and I hope you enjoy. From sigmagame.substack.com, Diagnosis Gamma. A recent NFL employment story highlights the importance of the applied SSH, and that stands for sociosexual hierarchy. A story reported yesterday about the head coaching changes in the NFL illustrates both the importance of understanding how the SSH, sociosexual hierarchy, explains male behavior as well as the importance of not putting men into situational roles for which they are sociosexually inappropriate. Many professional football fans were surprised when Mike Vrabel was fired by the Tennessee Titans after 6 generally successful seasons as the head coach there. He got to the playoffs 3 times, the AFC Championship game once, and was even named Coach of the Year in 2021. And the caption here, at 6'4", 260, with 3 Super Bowl rings, Vrabel is an intimidating alpha. People were even more surprised when, despite being one of the favorites for 2 of the 8 different vacant head coaching jobs, Vrabel didn't land with a new team. But the most surprising thing about the entire process was the reason that was given to one female reporter by an NFL general manager for why Vrabel wasn't hired. Quote, I had a GM at the Senior Bowl who mentioned to me Vrabel's physical build, that he's a very large human being, and that can be very intimidating to people in an organization. End quote. Now, this sounds like something a woman would say, but there are no female GMs in the league right now. The San Diego Chargers have interviewed NFL executive Dawn LaPonte, or possibly Dawn LaPonte, for the job, but ended up hiring Joe Ortiz from the Baltimore Ravens instead, so we know the GM quoted was a man. But what sort of GM rejects a head coach who has been successful at every level of the game as a player and a coach, who has won 3 Super Bowls as a player and team captain and is known to be a popular and formidable leader of men on the basis of his size? The answer is obvious: a gamma male who literally fears the physical presence of a large alpha. Gammas tend to fear and despise alphas on an instinctive level. And this is why it is always a terrible idea to put a gamma in charge of a group of men, because he will not do what is best for the group or for attaining the group's objective. Instead, he will always prioritize what makes him feel comfortable and important, then rationalize those priorities as being good for the group. In fact, one way to quickly detect if you're dealing with gamma in a situational role that should be held by an alpha, in the event it's not immediately obvious, is to observe whether he explains things directly using I and taking personal responsibility, or passively using we. and placing the responsibility on the collective. In the example above, note that the GM blames the team's disinterest in hiring Vrabel on people in an organization rather than coming right out and saying, he scares me and makes me feel unimportant because he's big. Now, not hiring Mike Vrabel does not necessarily mean a team will be unsuccessful or that its GM will fail at his job. But the problem is that anyone who won't hire Vrabel because he's too big and scary also won't hire the likes of Dan Campbell, Dan Quinn, Mike Tomlin, Bill Parcells, Tom Landry, Bud Grant, or Bill Belichick, which means that GM is going to be making his choice from a smaller and less successful pool. And that is not a recipe for success. And what on earth is that GM going to do about the oversized players that populate the NFL? Draft 180-pound defensive tackles and 5'6" quarterbacks? Never, ever put a gamma in a role where he has power over alphas. One way or another, it's not going to end well. Learn more about the sociosexual hierarchy from Vox Day at sigmagame.substack.com. That's sigmagame.substack.com. I'm obviously a big fan of Vox Day. I would describe him as one of my chief intellectual influences. All right. I think it's about time we got to the great Naomi Wolf. Don't forget, go to epicthreads.tv. You can get rose-infused angel paste and other stuff, including the unscented angel paste. And my goodness, guys, new stuff's about to hit that website. Really good stuff. So just keep an eye on that space, epicthreads.tv. From naomiwolf.substack.com. What is a culture? Is cynical mass illegal immigration being deployed against our national culture? By Dr. Naomi Wolf. These days, I dread, under certain circumstances, getting into New York City taxis. Cultures around the world vary, of course. That should not be a taboo sentence. And there are some cultures in this world in which women have no voice at all and are treated with complete disrespect. I don't wish to name that culture, as generalizations can indeed be racist or xenophobic. I've lived for 2 decades in New York City, and usually my interactions with cab drivers are absolutely lovely. But the new reality is inescapable. More often than not, when the driver of the taxi to which I am now doomed is from a part of the world where these particular misogynist cultures exist, and if the driver is a recently arrived immigrant and male, I know that I will have a miserable argument before I can arrive at my destination. Sir, you're heading north. We're going to Brooklyn, which is south. Lady, I know what I am doing, spat out between gritted teeth. I don't mean to offend you, but we need to turn left and go down 7th Avenue. We have gone 8 blocks north now, out of our way. Why are you telling me how to drive my cab? Voice rising. I'd like you to turn left, please, at the next possible left turn and head down 7th. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know the best way to go? Do you want to keep telling me how to do my job? Shouting angrily, waves of neon red hostility filling the cab. By the time I get to my destination, I am a wreck. No matter how calm and polite I have remained, I have infuriated my driver merely by being a woman giving him directions. The fact is that in this particular culture, women are not apparently supposed to direct men under any circumstances at all. So in the cab, when I am inevitably forced to give some direction or else be stuck with variously, heading literally the wrong way, getting stuck in horrible midtown traffic, or taking a huge, costly detour, this act on my part, as courteously as I can achieve it, seems to have the effect of a red rag on a bull. Men from this culture, at least in these situations, seem to experience a woman directing them as being horribly offensive, outrageous, and demeaning. And frankly, The way they then feel comfortable treating me, a stranger to whom they are not married or related, whose lot in life they do not direct in any way, feels to me, as a Western woman with a completely different set of expectations about the customer-cab driver relationship, bullying and a bit threatening and certainly degrading and overall emotionally exhausting. I hate my half hour of being a second-class citizen trapped in these drivers' cabs. I hate being treated for that short length of time the way women are treated in the societies that produce the men who think these behaviors are fine. I can't wait to get out and be a Western woman again who can take for granted that she can give and receive information from and to everyone around her, including from and to men, and be treated as a peer or as an equal. That expectation I have, that I am a free person too, and that we need to treat each other, men and women both, with equal rights and respect, is a very clear and costly expectation. We did not arrive at it effortlessly, dating from the birth of our nation. The fight for women's equality in the West has taken centuries, and it demanded wave upon wave of advocacy and activism spanning generations. It is an arduous achievement, a consensus of a whole culture. It is a crown jewel of ours. Women in the past in the West could only dream about such a world, such a victory. Women around the world who still live in nations like the ones that produce this situation I described, with cultures in which the men feel free to abuse any strange woman who is unlucky enough to get into their taxis, long for the rights and respect that they deserve, that we Western women take for granted. So, what is a culture? A culture is a set of complex agreements among millions of people who are often united by national identity. Culture is fragile. It takes so much time and agreement and hard work. A culture is no trivial thing. Our culture, the culture of America, of North America, of the West, is no trivial thing. The way we have been encouraged to think about culture as always in need of fixing and updating, as chock-a-block with microaggressions, as if it is an old felt fedora moldering in the attic in a moment when everyone is bareheaded and snapping selfies, as if it's no more than an inconvenient aggregate of boring required reading and of music that no one can quite remember, all written or composed by dead white men who exploited their slaves. All this discourse is intended, I believe, to mask a deeper truth, a knowledge of deeper powers we have that we are being encouraged to forget. Western culture contains some of the greatest accomplishments of human beings ever, the greatest treasures, and these are treasures for all. The simple expectation I described above, that women and men have the same rights and freedoms as one another, is one crucial example affecting 52% of humanity. So this expectation that in America, women are equal in rights and respect to men is at the heart of my social contract as an American. It is not at the heart of my driver's social contract. Thus, there is an existential incompatibility there. If it is just one obnoxious cab driver, that incompatibility is not very ominous or meaningful. The role of legal immigration of the past, the kind of limited legal immigration that welcomed my Russian grandmother and grandfather, my Romanian grandmother and grandfather, my Romanian-born father, my German-born former father-in-law, my husband Brian's Irish-born paternal grandmother and grandfather, his Czech-born maternal grandmother, his Ivory Coast-born maternal grandfather, and so on, was designed to absorb immigrants with all of their cultural differences and acclimate them in ways that our nation could manage and from which it could even benefit into our social contract and into our robust culture as Americans. That is what used to be meant by the beautiful phrase, we are a nation of immigrants. We, legal immigrants, all came here to become Americans together, meaning to participate in this best of all social contracts that involved equality of opportunity, freedom, a certain history, a rule of law, and a certain set of governance processes and founding documents. But a culture requires some consensus and shared language, values, and beliefs in order to hold together. That is why we have naturalization processes that teach legal immigrants about our culture and democratic systems. And that is why we used to have civics classes. We were teaching students from all over what America was and what America meant. That acculturation is why in Israel new immigrants are given free, intensive Hebrew lessons called ulpanim. That is why in Norway, as I was told by my hosts when I was there on a speaking tour, that new immigrants from cultures that torture or imprison male homosexuals have to be taught in classes that in Norway, the cultural contract is that male homosexuality is legal. Here is another example of a Western cultural expectation that one is quiet when sharing the experience of the wilderness or libraries or public transportation. There are a lot of interesting reasons that when you go to a national or state park or beach or hiking trail, a wilderness area or a bus or train, the U.S. social norm, sometimes protected by signs, is that we try to maintain a certain level of quiet. This tradition probably goes back to the values of the transcendentalist movement of the 1840s. This movement manifested in Britain as well a bit earlier under the name of Romanticism or in the pursuit of the sublime. In this influential movement, ordinary British or American men and women were understood to be able to encounter a greater sense of connection to their creator, to their own higher selves, and to existential truths in the presence of unspoiled wilderness, or books, or art. Transcendentalism and the pursuit of the sublime are also predicated upon another critical Western value, that of individual sensibility or private consciousness. From these influences, we probably derive the practice of not bothering other people too much who are gazing at a sunset or having a quiet picnic in a wilderness area or reading a book on a train. We have been taught that we have individual private thoughts and that they are important. So we don't want to intrude on others' important private thoughts. Well, not every culture shares this set of values. There are people who have poured into this country in the last few months, and the immigration over the southern border now amounts to an estimated 16.8 illegal migrants in the United States, 16.8 million, whose cultural expectation is much more collectivist and less individualistic than is ours. This cultural consensus is much louder in expression than are the norms in the West, where until recently teachers and librarians told our kids to shush in museums and on field trips and in libraries. For these incoming cultures, portable radios, surrounded by crowds, play at top levels in public places, especially in city or suburban parks. Cell phones ring as loudly as possible, and whole video programs are watched at full volume on trains and buses and even in gyms and libraries. Everyone hears the music, the conversations, the ringtones. There is no escape from the collectivist's noise level for one's private thoughts. One might think that this cultural change is trivial, but is it? Only if you expect it to have no say in your cultural norms. One could argue that these high decibel cultures are less repressed or more exciting cultures than ours, surely. But whether you like the difference in decibel levels in shared public spaces or you don't, the approach to quiet versus noise in shared public spaces is a major cultural difference, predicated on the incredibly important idea in the West that the individual and not the collective is the building block of society. When just a few people from societies with much louder social contracts join a culture in which the social contract is to leave others alone with their thoughts in parks or on trains, the newcomer is eventually absorbed, and each, the newcomer and the host nation, learns from the other. The host culture adjusts, and the wonders that are America as a true melting pot are the result. Certainly, America has gotten richer, stronger, livelier, with better music and fashion and food and fresher ideas as each wave of legal immigration has been absorbed into the existing social contract and as consensus, What do we believe now? How do we act as Americans is arrived at in every generation, always anew. But that is not the situation we have right now. The UN, as my last essay on the border pointed out, is actively staging an invasion of the southern border of the United States, weaponizing cynically the bodies of millions of people. There is $372 million from the UN funding a voucher system to support illegal migration into the US. Readers must understand that this is an act of war, since the UN has, by doing so, gone from being, or at least claiming to be, a neutral global arbiter to being a supranational body that is using its immense power and resources to wage war on the laws and policies and national sovereignty of a member state. This is unprecedented. The UN is not supposed to be an activist destroying a nation's borders. It is not supposed to carve up countries or depopulate or repopulate against national laws whole regions. Unbelievably, the UN, along with aligned puppet NGOs, is coordinating with the White House to manage this extraordinary flow of humanity into the United States. These documents can be hard to follow as they cover up rhetorically who is going where and why, but the UN, with the collaboration of the White House, is managing the movements of millions of people via aid to Honduras and via complex and highly funded staging areas in Guatemala, with a stated goal of getting millions, especially children, with tenuous connections to sponsors, into the United States. From FAIR, over time, estimated U.S. illegal alien population 2010 to present has gone from 11.9 to 16.8 million. Net cost of illegal immigration since 2010 has gone from 99 billion to 150 billion. Replacement theory was supposed to be a right-wing conspiracy theory, and yet here is the UN Secretariat white paper from 2000. Replacement migration, is it a solution to declining and aging populations? Read excerpts from the whole astonishing document about this effort that is on the White House website. Expand access to international protection, build and improve national asylum systems. In Guatemala, the State Department funded the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to continue supporting the government of Guatemala to build its asylum capacity in line with its National Action Plan commitments under the Comprehensive Regional Protection and Solutions Framework. Guatemala received more than 1,000 asylum claims in 2021, which is over double the number received in any prior year. In Mexico, the Commission for Refugee Assistance accepted more than 131,000 applications for asylum in 2021, becoming the third highest receiver of claims in the world, with State Department support through UNHCR. COMAR granted asylum to 37,806 individuals in 2021. Established migration resource centers. With State Department funding, the International Organization for Migration, UNHCR, and the UN Children's Fund have collaborated with the government of Guatemala to establish 3 MRCs, referred to locally as Centros de Atención a Personas Migrantes y Refugiadas, or CAP-MIRs, in Guatemala City, Tecún and Quetzaltenango. In addition, 7 mobile units operate as part of the MRC network, covering 6 departments in Guatemala. The MRCs are located to benefit communities at risk of displacement with high levels of immigration and also along transit routes. They are designed to evaluate individuals' protection, humanitarian, and economic needs in order to provide appropriate services and referrals, and have reached more than 32,000 individuals, end quote. Asylum? Where? Displacement? To where? Emigration? To where? Transit routes? To where? Quote, in Honduras, the U.S. Agency for International Development funded psychosocial support, gender-based violence prevention activities, migration awareness, and children's rights protection information to approximately 5,100 Honduran youth and to over 1,375 returned migrants and IDPs impacted by the 2020 hurricanes, end quote. What is migration awareness? Where are those impacted by the 2020 hurricanes being encouraged to go? Why the focus on youth and children? Then you get to it. Yep. The White House is encouraging, funding with our tax dollars and facilitating the movements of these millions of humans, quote, expand third country labor migration programs while improving workers' protections. Institutional capacity building. USAID supported the Guatemalan Ministry of Labor, the Honduran Ministry of Labor, and the Salvadoran Ministry of Foreign Affairs through the design and implementation of new processes to increase access to seasonal work opportunities abroad, resulting in a record number of H-2B visas issued to nationals of these countries in fiscal year 2021, with further growth expected in fiscal year 2022. In Costa Rica, State Department funding for IOM supported the processing of 18,000 migrant requests in the agricultural temporary labor migration category. Next, expand support for migrant workers' protections. In El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, USAID funded pre-departure training for seasonal workers on their rights under the H-2 visa program. In El Salvador, State Department funding for IOM supported the participation of officials from the Ministries of Labor and External Affairs in a specialized course on best practices in labor migration management. The Salvadoran Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare also hosted an event to share best practices on ethical recruitment involving participants from El Salvador, Honduras, and Panama, end quote. Yes. The White House and the UN are recruiting and funding humans from El Salvador, Honduras, and Panama, along with those from a total of 114 countries, to unlawfully migrate with USAID and State Department and UN funding here. Quote, in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, USAID funded pre-departure training for seasonal workers on their rights under the H-2 visa program, end quote. That is what this inflow is being called, seasonal workers. But these folks are being recruited, trained, made aware of migration and transit routes, staged, dressed, and housed, given, per my earlier essay on the UN program, loaded ATM cards, envelopes of cash, free meals en route in staging centers, and direct bank transfers, and are relatively hugely empowered. Not at the mercy, as in the past, only of jackals and the hideous elements, but with the whole prestige and the massive apparatus of the U.S. government and the UN behind them and supporting them. Then they are transited to be deposited at the border, to walk across without stay or hindrance, and to be transported after that via plane and bus to everywhere in our nation. They are shipped then to where, locally, as in New York City, free housing in hotels, free electronic tablets, free scooters, free medical care await them. New York City plans to spend $1 billion to house unlawful immigrants for free in hotels for 3 more years. Why is New York City expecting that for the next 3 years, these immigrants won't be able to house themselves? Why incentivize their journeys in this way? Did your immigrant grandparents get free housing in a hotel for 3 years? Did mine, if you are a recent legal immigrant to the U.S., did you get 3 years of free collective housing? No. In the past, immigrants to this nation were let into this country, and whether poor or rich, Anglophones or not able to speak a word of English, they were expected to do their best. In the Lower East Side, in Queens, in Brooklyn's Little Caribbean, in Chinatown, in New Jersey, in Detroit, in Cleveland. And through this expectation were born great innovation, entrepreneurship, and contributions to the national wealth of ideas and resources. Children were educated, the American dream was strengthened, and it persisted. For these unlawful immigrants' future care, in contrast, the New York State governor wishes to earmark $2.4 billion out of her state's budget for just 1 year. In Salem, Massachusetts, a storefront with delectable fresh fruit, meat, and seafood is not open to those elderly or veteran or disabled Americans nearby who are not enrolled in certain USDA benefit programs that the facility requires for shoppers to enter its nicely designed doors. But If you can get past the application process to shop there, this facility offers, incredibly enough, subsidized DoorDash delivery of free or subsidized food to a largely illegally immigrated population. This storefront offering is in something of a food desert, in the sense that there are few supermarkets or shops otherwise selling produce in the area and none within walking distance. This means that elderly and disabled Americans and veterans who live close by this elegant little off-limits shop are not being treated as well as are our illegal alien new neighbors. What the heck is going on? Among other things, this weird pampering is and will prove to be a dangerous disruption in our American culture. Immigrants to our shores in the past, your grandparents and mine, and perhaps you yourself, were far from entitled. The legal immigrants expected very little from the state. They were the opposite of entitled. This nation gave them a fair chance to work incredibly hard, and hard work and meritocracy as a result are part of the treasure trove legacy of our nation. But what will these newcomers, treated in this weirdly codependent way by the state, learn about themselves in relation to America? They will learn that it is a nation with gross class divides, with them themselves in a privileged class, and that nothing is expected of immigrants, not even the expectation of obeying the laws. And that legacy, too, will be a disruption to our work ethic, American culture, an aspect of our culture that is also so awesome, in fact, though it too has taken such a reputational beating. This situation, of course, also disrupts Americans' security and safety. Columnist Howie Carr, in the February 4th, 2024 Boston Herald, shares a verbatim interview with a security guard who works at one of the repurposed hotels in Marlborough, Massachusetts. The guard discusses the fact that illegal aliens are purchasing and operating motor vehicles without having licenses. He describes the constant need for police at the facility and the danger that the situation poses to nearby schools. The source also describes the entitled attitude of the new arrivals and their sense of impunity when it comes to the laws of our nation. But how could it be otherwise? This treatment of these newcomers in these strangely hampering ways is one reason that the image of a gang of illegal aliens savagely beating two New York City police officers in Times Square, both of whom had fallen to the ground in the course of being attacked by this group, enduring kicks to the head and body, and the later image of one of the alleged predators flipping off the nation was so resonant. We intuit that this is what these policies, are creating. Is this chaos, perhaps, what these policies are designed to create? It is impossible to dismiss a growing awareness that the White House and the UN are not just helping migrants in other countries, though why is that our priority, who are already displaced. They are facilitating and instigating ruinous and dangerously empowered mass illegal migration to our country. A report by WOLA, halfway to the U.S., a report from Honduras on migration by a nonprofit that advocates for migrants to America, reveals far more than the authors may realize. This report shows that there are now complex and well-established UN, White House, and U.S. aid-funded respite or rest centers in Honduras, and all along a mapped out migration trail that leads to our southern border. The maps in this report show a giant infrastructure funded by the UN, the White House, and allied NGOs of border crossings and jurisdictions designed to care for, inform, and support these migrants at every stage of their journeys. It mentions that 300 people a day are processed via these U.S.-funded rest centers, though the need is to process 800. In the report, migrants complain that the food they get on the journey is not good enough. There appears to be an app that the migrants are given with information on it about how to make the entire journey, along with details about support and funding and food along the way. In the past, America could absorb every legal newcomer, and the cultural contract was renewed and reinforced. Those legal newcomers, your grandparents and mine, longed to be Americans culturally. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, wrote poet Emma Lazarus about our grandparents' generations of legal immigrants in a poem that is engraved on the Statue of Liberty. But this cynical bomb dropped on the US in the form of bodies is not that. Incomers of fighting age, with few or no elders among them, few or no one disabled, most of them in their 20s, walking like an army, come from Afghanistan, Yemen, and Turkey, from Angola and Saudi Arabia and China, from Belize and Haiti and Honduras and Colombia. Other countries in the map show thousands of migrants of unspecified origins. Many of those nations above are decades-long sources for cruel mercenaries. Many are run by violent cartels. One, China, sent increasing numbers of human beings in 2023, and it is a nation that unleashed perhaps two bioweapons on us, the virus and the vaccine, and that wants us simply gone. Many of these nations do not see women as we do, or homosexual rights as we do, or even racial equality as we do. America is not, as it turns out, kind of bad compared to the rest of the world. The insane message to our young of the recent past, America is actually kind of fantastic compared to much of the rest of the world, no matter who you are. You want anti-black racism? Try China. You want sexism? Try Afghanistan, in which 54 of 80 edicts of the Taliban target women and girls, including restricting their freedom of movement and education. You want homophobia? Egypt's security forces torture gay men. What if those who don't see women as equal, and those who expect to torture or imprison homosexuals, or those who have no experience of the rule of law but who understand cartels, or those who are encouraged by the state to stop paying attention to work or to personal effort, arrive in a culture, our culture, by the tens of millions? That is what is happening now. There won't be time or will or energy for us to successfully absorb such a mass of newcomers into our American culture. Rather, the newcomers' values will absorb America. It's hard enough for me when the guy who does not think women should have a voice is responsible for my taxi ride. What will America be like when he is making our laws? Our culture itself will break. The consensus will break. The human rights accomplishments, the accomplishments of gender equality, of inclusion, will all fall apart. There is nothing racist about noticing this danger, that our cultural norms, our achievements as a society, our consensus for human rights and the rule of law may fall apart. Moroccans would and should worry about their national culture and heritage if the UN underwrote 10 million Germans to enter their nation unlawfully. Ghanaians would rightly object if 10 million Swedes were funded by international bodies to push their non-Ghanaian morals and beliefs into the heart of their nation and to stake out and overwhelm the resources intended for Ghanaian elderly and Ghanaian children. There must be a reason behind this seemingly insane, unbelievably complex, multinational superstructure facilitating illegal immigration into our America, funded by our own tax dollars and by the UN's mighty coffers. Is the breaking apart our culture, our beautiful culture and freedom and the rule of law and equality of rights, that thorn in the side of tyrants since 1776 via the unprecedented method of a mass assault using human bodies, the reason for this structured invasion? And that is Naomi Wolf's latest. A couple comments from me. In New York, why aren't you using Uber? they have to follow the Uber app that tells them which way to go. So I'm just telling you, don't take cabs. Don't do that. Cabs suck. And if we sent, I don't know, if we sent 10 million Swedes into Ghana, Ghana would get cleaned up pretty fucking quick. Just saying, guys. I'm not trying to be racist or anything, but come on. 10 million, although Swedes have become pretty weakened faggots these days. I don't know. The Swedes of the 1960s would clean that shit up. Anyway, what do I know? Naomi Wolf is important in my opinion because she represents the liberals in my mind. She comes from the so-called left. And it really is nice to see her awakening, which is different from ours. Just because we think that homosexuality is a sin doesn't mean that we should codify the torturing and imprisoning of homosexuals. Now, I don't really know exactly what they mean by torturing and imprisoning of homosexuals. If a homosexual is going out in public and recruiting people to become homosexuals themselves, I can see why that would be something that the state would want to clean up. But if it's just people being quietly homosexual behind closed doors, I think that should be left alone. And that makes me, pretty far right, even in this country. But I think the general government stance towards sexuality in general is keep your private parts out of the public square. My personal opinion, and I feel pretty strongly about it. Just in general, I think it's pretty clear that that our friend Naomi Wolf is really onto something, and she's approaching it from a liberal point of view. And as I have said more times than I can count at this point, until we get the liberals on our side, we're in trouble. We have to have them. They are our brethren of this country. They are the people who were right about every single war and we were wrong about. And we need them. I would very much like to get them to abandon their weird obsession with baby murder. I kind of find them difficult to coexist with because of abortion, but I can coexist with them on pretty much every issue at this point. But anyway, I'm going on and on. Don't forget to go to epicthreads.tv. Let me just show you that website. Just for grinsies, let's take a look at epicthreads.tv. I'm kind of proud of this. Ashley, my wife, with some assistance from a professional, put this together. We've got Epic Threads, handpicked marketplace by the man who reads Epic Threads. That's me. I read Epic Threads. Epic Picks, Angel Paste Miracle Cream. We got a Be Epic t-shirt. We're going to start. We do have an agreement with Printify. Get your Angel Paste stuff, and then the merch. Ashley, what do you think? Ashley made the Kiss the Truther mug. I think that's awesome. So check that out. We're going to have to start holding inventory in-house because this whole shipping from multiple locations things is turning out to make shipping more expensive. But check out epicthreads.tv because there's more stuff coming. We've got artisan soap coming. I'm really excited about that. Soap that is poison-free, like truly poison-free, made by Epic Threads people, by thread people. And we'll get into that soon. And then we've got some nutritional supplements coming as well. We are talking to formulators and chemists about making shampoos and conditioners that will not poison you. So keep checking back at epicthreads.tv. Truly, the best is yet to come. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching today's Reading Epic Threads. It's always a pleasure to have a job because of you, to have an audience because of you. And hopefully we keep this going and growing this. Let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.